Okay, so today is Sunday, December 1st. Happy December, last month of the year. But today, and honestly yesterday, I have just been kind of just observing conversations between like my siblings and my parents and that kind of thing. And I've just been thinking a lot about expertise and knowing whether you should, well, first of all, when you are sharing information, knowing if you have the authority to share that information. Like, at what level do you need to be an expert to share information? And also receiving that information, how do you know, like, even if they are experts, how do you know if you should, like, follow that information, right? And that's just kind of something that has been talked about over the past few days, and it's just been interesting to think about. And I kind of want to just use this video to kind of try to figure out these things. So in terms of teaching, like sharing information, or trying, like you yourself are actively doing something and you are wondering if you have the expertise to do something, right? It's kind of like imposter syndrome, right? Imposter syndrome is thinking that you aren't, like you don't have this expertise to do something, you don't have the ability. Imposter syndrome is thinking that you don't have the abilities, but then there's also the opposite. Well, I'm not sure if it's the opposite of that, but there's also something called the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is where as you learn about something, your perception of how much you know goes up, but eventually there's like a little dip and you realize that, wow, I actually don't know that much. And then from there, it goes up the more you learn. So people who first start to learn about something think they know a lot, and then they realize, wow, I actually don't know that much. So the beginning of the Dunning-Kruger effect is kind of like thinking that you know thinking that you do have the abilities, and then imposter syndrome is kind of like thinking that you don't have the abilities. So how do you truly know if you have the abilities, right? How do you know, like, first of all, if you have the authority to share those abilities and like teach other people whatever your thing is, but also like how do you know if you have the abilities to do the thing? So I'll give an example. I'll take learning an instrument for an example. Because when I first started learning how to drum, I thought I was like, I know all of this, I know all these different things, and I can like improvise or whatever. And I thought I knew all of that, but then as I started to learn more, I realized, oh wait, I actually don't know that much. That was the Dunning-Kruger effect. So at what point do I know if I have the ability to play in a band or something like that? At what point do I know if I have the knowledge to teach someone else, right? Because I don't think I would be able to teach someone else how to drum. But I do think that with smaller things like skills, like learning an instrument, coding, that kind of thing, I think with those kinds of skills, as you can teach someone something as long as they are at a lower level than you, right? You can always teach someone if they're lower in skill level than you, right? Because I am not that great of a drummer, but I could teach someone who has never drummed ever, I could teach them at least a little bit, right? So I think in terms of teaching something, if it's just like a harmless skill, I do think that you can always teach something as long as they're at a lower level than you, right? And honestly, in a more like informal way, you can always learn, like even if there is someone at a higher skill level than you, they can still learn from you, right? You can learn something from everyone no matter what skill level, right? So there's that part of it. But then there's also the part of it of like, how do you know if you have the ability to do something? So kind of like on the imposter syndrome side, like let's say I wanted to play in a band. How do I know if I'm good enough to play in a band, right? With my drumming. And honestly, that I think fully depends on the standards, right? You need to figure out like what are the measurable standards that I know, like if I achieve those standards, then I will be able to do this thing, right? And that's ultimately what goals are. Goals are standards that we're trying to meet in order to do something. So I think if you are wondering like, am I good enough to do this thing? First of all, just having experience and just like doing the things, like solving problems and just over and over doing the actions gives you experience and shows you what you're capable of, and also shows you what you're not capable of when you fail. And then you can like ask for help, ask for those authoritative figures in whatever thing you're doing for help, right? But honestly, I think if you set the bar, if you set the standard for something that you want to learn or do, and then just try to work up to that standard, it doesn't have to be super like numbers and measurable, but at least if you have something in mind, like, I know when I achieve this thing, and when I achieve this thing, I will know I am at the level of ability that I want to be at. That kind of thing. So that is how you can know if you are good enough to teach someone or to have a certain skill or ability. But then how do you know, like, that's when you're giving information, when you're actively using that information. But when you're receiving information, how do you know if the person or thing that you're receiving information from is reliable, right? That's something that like my family has been talking about lately, and I've kind of just been observing their conversation and kind of trying to absorb everything they're saying, because they've been thinking about that. Like, at what point do you know, like, should we listen to this person or should we not listen to this person? Because they say, like, they are an expert in this field, but, like, how do we know if we should actually just 100% trust that, or if we should, like, try to figure out the truth on its own? Because it all comes down to, when you're receiving knowledge or skills from someone else, it all comes down to truth. And you need to make sure that what you are absorbing is truth, right? And sometimes that's not as easily not definable. That's not as easily known. And that's where, like, discernment comes from. Like, understanding if something is true or not. That kind of thing. In most things, you can discern whether something is true or not by using the Bible. If you don't know, I'm a Christian, and to the best of my ability, I try to rely on the Bible as, like, a foundation for truth, right? So when I'm trying to figure out if something is true or not, I try to rely on the Bible for that. And that might not be specific to your situation, but it will give you wisdom and it will give you guidance to think about certain things, right? But other than that, for me at least, I really like, for some reason, the way that I like building things from the ground up and figuring things out by myself and not just having something be told to me. Like, I like figuring things out by myself and building something by myself, even if it's easier to just go buy something or, like, have someone just give me the information straight up, right? So I think in that way, I think it is good at times to try to figure things out by yourself. Definitely not with everything, because that's just not sustainable. And you can't just rely on yourself and your own opinions and abilities, because you are biased and you're not always going to be truthful. And you need to, like, have other people around you and do have, like, those kinds of experts or whatever around you. But I do think it is good to try to figure things out by yourself and to just be logical about things and be objective about things and think things through rightly. So I do think that is good, but I also do think that there's always a time for just relying on the experts and relying on other people and trusting that they are right, and being more, instead of, like, if you have a belief, you are biased towards that belief, and anything you see will make you biased towards that belief, right? But if someone has the opposite belief and they see the same things, they will be biased about their belief, right? So you have to be open-minded and have to be objective, and sometimes you have to figure things out by yourself, but mostly, obviously, don't believe everything you see on the internet. And I'm not just talking about the internet, but, that's an example. Most of the time, though, you should be relying on the people who have already done that work, the people who have already figured things out by themselves and who are experts in that field and have done it a bunch of times and, like, actually know what they're talking about. Because it's like going back to the Dunning-Kruger effect. When I try to figure things out by myself, I realize, oh, wow, I actually don't know what I'm doing. Like, there's so much more that I don't know. And at that point, you just have to rely on what other people know that you don't know. So, I'm kind of I don't know if that made sense. I guess your takeaway for today is that if you kind of have imposter syndrome and you don't know if you have the abilities to do something or to teach something, realize, just set a standard for yourself. When you're teaching something, you can always teach something to someone at a lower skill level than you. And honestly, you can always learn something from someone who is at a lower skill level. So always be open-minded in that way and be flexible in that way. When you're trying to learn a skill, just set a standard for yourself. Set a goal. Just set goals to try to achieve to build your skill so that you know you do have the abilities to do whatever thing you want to do. When you're receiving information, just always have an open mind and always just try to be as objective as possible and make sure you have a foundation for truth. That's why I think the Bible is just such a crazy good thing to have as a Christian, because it gives us a foundation for morals and it gives us a foundation of how to think about things. And I think having that kind of foundation for truth is very helpful when you're trying to discern different things. So, if you had to take away one thing from this video, it would be to be open-minded and be objective, having a good foundation for truth. So yeah, that is what I learned today. If you like this video, then definitely hit the like button. If you have any thoughts on this, if you are an expert in something, then maybe you can leave your comments down below in the comment section. If you want to see more videos like these, then definitely subscribe, because I'm posting every single day talking about what I learned that day and how I'm trying to apply it to my life and how you guys can apply it to yours. So if you want to see that kind of thing, then definitely subscribe. This video is specifically recommended for you, so if you find that interesting, then you can definitely click on it. You can subscribe in that corner. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in tomorrow's video. Bye.